Let's have a look at Newspoll. So, before we get to the numbers, remember when Parliament ended, and this is always a little bit of a lesson in polling, right? Now, we remember how wrong polling was, right? So it is just a survey, okay? The survey says, the Pons Institute says, right? Nobody says anything other than this. However, of course, the big changes they were able to get through when it came to Medivac means a little boost going into when they started asking people what they thought. There was a change in the methodology about Newspoll where they've moved to a more online system than the phone or the knocking on people's doors.
They got it wrong last time.
Correct. So, well, okay. But remember the week before, this was when Angus Taylor was about to swing from a, what an outrage that was, playing Canberra Columbos. And people like The Guardian were saying, the worst week of Scott Morrison's Prime Ministership. Well, his numbers are up now, according to the polls. So, yet again, we said it all the way through. Don't believe the inevitable. Don't believe the people who got it wrong. Keep listening to the people who at least were aware that maybe it ain't as bad as they think. Or, of course, it was pretty good the past couple of weeks. Have a look here. Overall, the coalition have gone up. Two-party preferred, 52-48. It was 51-49. And that meant all of the opinion people said it was all getting too close. So, preferred Prime Minister, Scott Morrison got better in the past couple of weeks. Albo got worse in the past couple of weeks. The breakdowns will all be there in the Australian newspaper in the next little while, including tomorrow they've asked people to rank in terms of trustworthiness, arrogance, decisiveness, all the rest of it. Apparently the worst number for the Prime Minister is the perception of arrogance versus Anthony Albanese, but Anthony Albanese's worst is about decisiveness. And I always believe that part of being considered a decisive person is they also say, well, hang on, therefore arrogant as well. But let's talk about the overall number there, where the government ends the year.
Well, Paul, even though they said it was tough for the Prime Minister, can I say that's when the Prime Minister is at his best?
Every time.
He fights back like you wouldn't believe, where they try to attack his religion or anything at all. He doesn't suck it up and he doesn't cower in defeat. He just gives them a big bloody right hook, and it works for him, and he continues to do that. He'll remain very popular. His popularity will only increase, there's no question.
Well, also, when Albo sits back and they were all patting their backs about playing Canberra Colombo on Angus Taylor, think about what they could have done with this 2 weeks. Yeah. They could have made Westpac go for the entire first week, and that be the focus. Yeah. Then there would have been the legislative loss in the Parliament of the Union Bill. Then, this week, you could have had a scenario where you started to talk about the drought or relentlessly tried to own the Veterans Royal Commission. But instead, they did exactly what Shorten did, and they chased Twitter. They're pushed around by the people who think that Angus Taylor, who's been fitted up with how many of these things?
128. These
fake sort of, push the dots. Like, just because you want the dots to connect does not mean they connect, all right? People did this with Julia Gillard. Remember how hard they tried to push the dots, and the dots could never... Doesn't matter what you think or what you feel, but pushing... They've done it how many times to Angus Taylor? So much so people are on the telly declaring him gone. And again, it's one poll. And when it was going down, it was one poll, and the polls were so horrifically wrong last time. But it gives us yet again that those that are paid to full-time talk about politics, who were so burnt by getting it so wrong this year, were searching to send the Prime Minister off to Christmas with his tail between his legs. He ends up not just getting Medivac, getting control of the borders, but he gets a number before he heads off to break saying the joint's happy with him. There's no buyer's remorse here.
Santa's been good.
Well, but I'm just saying, there's no buyer's remorse. The idea being pushed by the media generally in this country is that was all about Shorten, and now this mob is just as bad as it was at the end of last year. Yeah. There is no evidence about that whatsoever.
There is no comparison.
This is the thing. But you see, this is despite they're to blame for bushfires. They're to blame for the smoke in the sun. Normal people, look. They don't love any politicians. And one poll doth not mean, that's it, lock it in, you're away, you're going to have a great 2020. But the idea of some of the catastrophising that's been going on amongst the professional media set, I hope they spend a bit of time this Christmas going, well, how do we pull our head out of our arse? But I bet they don't.
No, well, they tend to be herd animals, as you know. It's like, what are we all thinking? I actually heard somebody on the ABC say, oh, all us finance journalists were surprised. What, you had to have a meeting before you decided what happened, I think that's pretty pathetic. But as far as Angus Taylor is concerned, I did say on Sky News Channel a couple of weeks ago, the way this is being pushed is just totally overboard for the average person. Yes, okay, let's agree that Taylor has been careless or somebody in his office has been careless, but I do not think that most people think that it was a deliberate forgery. And that was the line being pushed.
It's just a nonsense.
Exactly.
Also, it got exactly where, I mean, my sense of this the whole time was that, and look, there's a lot of sloppy in this to talk about. I understand. But sloppy ain't call the cops.
No.
And I think call the cops was a massive overreach from Labor, the relentless pursuit and carrying on and passing of language. Remember, this was the inappropriateness of picking up the phone to ring the police commissioner to work out if anything was going on.
The Prime Minister said he was going to do.
Bloody
but Paul,
hell.
Labor does not understand the Trump effect. They don't realise if we have a good Prime Minister that's working hard, doing all the right things and is well perceived by the public, and he's getting bashed, they will just gather behind him. Support will just garner behind the Prime Minister. And Labor, they haven't cottoned on to that yet.
Well, interesting here, and forgive me as I am trying to zoom out on the email that's just been released by the Australian newspaper, which is their front page, where, again, on some of these values issues about likeable, Prime Minister 50, Shorten, well, sorry, let's get to the numbers now, right? Where in likeable, both are rated between 1 and 100, so the number doesn't match up, that it's 100 split in half. Both sit at 56%. In terms of arrogant, you get 58 for Morrison and 40 for Albo. Cares about people, you've got 55 for Morrison and 60 for Albo, and I think trustworthy is the top number there, where Morrison is 48 and Albanese is 49. So Albo's got plenty out of this poll to sort of go, well, here's the building blocks. Why piddle that away by doing anything other than let's talk about banking regulation and how it failed? Why wouldn't you in question time say to them, well, the Banking Royal Commission was this, how many laws have we passed through? None of that. Instead, Twitter. Anyway.
In the drought where they nearly lost the seat of the Cholby seat.
Correct.
It's interesting, though, on the values thing, don't you think? Because it's okay to be a nice guy, but if you're going to be the chief guy, you don't want to be totally a pushover,
But that's what I'm saying. I think you want a high number for decisive, because Australians demand decisiveness. Australia is a country that wants decisiveness in its leadership.
A little bit of mongrel.
Well, but even if Shorten had became Prime Minister, you'd want a high decisive number because it shows he has a worldview and he's willing to make it happen, all right? Now, if that leads to arrogance and other things and trustworthy issues, but certainly decisiveness is one of those indices. Anyway, we've talked about that for too long.